There's probably 20 or 30 production companies that really sort of own the market. And then everyone else is sort of like got a great business or is building a great business, but they're kind of scratching at that next. They're like, why aren't we getting these things? And I'm not saying that for sure the press is what makes the difference. It's just that if you don't do it, you're not arming yourself with every potential asset to get there. For all the cynicism and all the like pessimism about the industry, I think it's the best time ever to be doing this job.
Hey everyone, today we're diving into the world of public relations, specifically around the advertising industry, of course. And to guide us is today's guest, Matt Van Hoven of Raven PR. Matt is the co-founder of Raven Public Relations and a former journalist who helps agencies, media companies, and publishers find their voice in the market and to make it heard. Matt has a ton of industry experience and knowledge, and today he talks to us about a lot of things. But to name a few, he tells us about Raven PR and what it is that they do, why PR companies support ad agencies, how we should be thinking about PR, and when a production company or creative directors even need to start thinking about working with a PR company, as well as working with Gary Vee at VaynerMedia and much, much more. So we hope you learn something and get something out of this episode with Matt Van Hoven.
A garden of pure ideology.
Yeah, just your typical Super Bowl car ad.
Or a hilarious beer ad.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
I think you're the best ever.
Look out. Back up. Where are you?
You're in the bush.
Well, how am I supposed to know? I've never been there.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do...
Wanna play Bob?
I think we're going to be here a while.
To break the ice, if you have one, do you have a favorite commercial? And why is it that one?
Yeah, I have a favorite commercial. It's actually, this is going to sound self-serving, but it was a client project that we did about a year ago now from an agency out of New York called Alto New York. They work with Montefiore Health System, which is like one of the biggest hospital systems, I think, in New York. It's right there in the Bronx, and it's an educational hospital. It's a very big organization. It's been around for a long time. It's kind of typically you don't see agencies really getting cracks at great work for hospitals and healthcare providers and that sort of thing. And this is what I love so much about Alto. They were tasked with helping create some awareness of the transplant services within the hospital system. And they ended up creating this really incredible, you can call it a campaign. It's really a product plus a campaign. So what they discovered was that if you need an organ transplant, there's very few ways to get one, right? Like either you get on a list somewhere and you get like a cadaver organ, or you can find what's called a living donor, which only works for, I think, kidney and liver transplants. Everything else, obviously, like you only have one heart, right? But you got two kidneys and a liver can regrow. So you can take those from a living donor. Well, it's like very hard to convince somebody to like lay down in a hospital bed and like give up a kidney, especially if they're not related. So it's just been a challenge, particularly if you're lower income, historically underrepresented, et cetera. Like there's just not a lot of options for those people. And there's a ton of people that need kidney and livers. So anyway, Alto's solution to this was to create a tool that allows people to make their own, really emotional sort of short film telling their story about like why they want to live essentially and like their goals and who they want to live for. And coinciding with that, they had a really incredible film that was essentially like the film that they made was looking at a sort of a fake patient, like a fake patient story. But what they did is they took a bunch of patient stories, combined them, and made this incredibly emotional piece of work. I can send you a link to this if you want to link to it.
Yeah, please do.
And then the product itself was incredible, right? Any person in the Montefiore Health System who needed a transplant could log on and in 5 minutes get this gorgeous campaign film that they could then post on social. And I mean, the reality is people that are getting organ transplants, like the ones that can afford it are putting up billboards next to the highway being like, I need an organ. It's crazy, right? Because they can't get them and the lists are so long and the odds of matching are so slim. So what I love about this, to make it short, is that it's the kind of the best example, or my favorite example, of creativity solving a real world problem and not just trying to sell shit, right? Like this is trying to actually save lives, and it does it with incredible craft and heart, you know, and at the same time, it's like something that is going to actually change lives.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Actually,
yeah, and I'd love to see that, and I'll link that in the show notes too. I saw, I'm gonna give you a second icebreaker here. If this one doesn't work, I'll just skip it. But I saw you have a lot of experience around the ad industry, like not just working in it, but watching it and commenting on it. I'm curious, can you tell us how accurate is the show Mad Men? And I know that there's like it takes place 30, 40, 50 years ago, but
yeah,
just for fun, is there anything that stood out in Mad Men? If you saw it, did you even see it?
I watched the whole thing top to bottom. And it's funny because I remember when it first launched, it kind of launched like around the same time that Twitter was gaining fame. And so like suddenly a bunch of the characters had like, there were Twitter accounts for some of like Peg and like some of the Don, everybody. There was a character for everyone. And for a long time,
like official, like AMC made them?
No, just like copywriters and people like in the industry. And I think some of them are still around.
That's funny.
And now there's like, what's that? Dong Draper account, which is sort of like a spin on that whole thing. And that's a really great one if you don't follow it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You know, I've always been sort of on the periphery of the industry and like wanting to work my way in. In fact, when I first graduated college, like I had a print journalism degree. And so I thought, well, I was having trouble finding journalism jobs, particularly because I wasn't very good, but secondarily because, you know, creativity was really the direction I wanted to head. So I put my resume on DVD. Like I built a book and put it on like a DVD because I thought I was being so like savvy and smart. I don't think anybody opened it. I took it to like 50 agencies in Milwaukee and 50 in Minneapolis, which is kind of where I'm from. And I didn't get a single call back, like not one call back. So I was like, oh no, like, how is this going to work? And then I started interning and eventually ended up moving to New York and started writing about advertising for Agency Spy. So like I kind of worked my way in from the outside. And as a reporter at Agency Spy, I often would get pitched stories that were sort of the Mad Men era stuff. Like famously, this is one that I didn't write, but it was published on Agency Spy. There was this couple that were caught doing things in the office they shouldn't have been doing.
Okay, that's on brand. That's Mad Men.
So yeah, and stuff like that. I mean, there was always stories like that. And then there was the other side of it too, which was like during the recession, or the last recession in 2007, 2008, there was a lot of like golden parachutes that were handed out to top executives at these big agencies as they were like imploding. And thousands of people are getting laid off with nothing, like no resources or whatever. So like we ended up covering a lot of that, what seemed at the time to me as a young reporter, like really dirty dealing. What I didn't know at the time was that if you're like a chief creative officer or a CEO or in the C-suite at some agency, like, and you've been around long enough, you know that part of your negotiation is that golden parachute, right? Like if they're going to fire you, they have to give you like a 6-month notice. They have to pay you for 2 years. I think BBDO most famously did this. Like they had these packages for creatives, like senior creatives, that when they left, they'd pay them, a lot of money every year to not work somewhere else. And so like the industry is very, like if you get to the top, or if you got to the top, it was incredibly different than if you were at the bottom. Like it was just two completely different worlds. And I think that going away, I mean, it hasn't completely gone away, but it's been a good, like somewhat it's been democratized. I think a lot of, the agencies that have popped up in the last couple of years are in large part response to like, I don't need this system. Like I can just go do this my own. And so I think part of that is creating a better world for advertising. I hope. I don't know. I mean, every day it seems like there's more. Yeah. There was a story in Adweek this week that was just like, shit, it's all still happening. But
I think you're right, though. I mean, it is changing in a lot of ways. A lot of the old powers don't seem to have the grip that they once had.
Yeah, that's true.
I find even TikTok to be intimidating sometimes, because you'll see like, there's a girl on TikTok. I wish I knew her name, but she just jokingly designed her way into being the McDonald's logo person now. It's kind of fascinating. So if that's not democratization of these systems, I'm sure there's some agency out there that looks at her TikTok and was like, what the hell? Are you kidding me? Like, we're BBDO. That's our McDonald's account, TikTok girl. But that's kind of crazy.
It is. And it's part of what makes me so sort of like, I don't know. I'm really excited about the creator economy side of things. We work with a couple of different companies that are specialists, and they predominantly like bring in creators, partner them up with brands. And it's not the like giant influencer media buy where you've got like 1,000 micro influencers posting the same message on the same day. It's like really highly custom stuff. But the goal is to get to that audience. And so if you want access to that audience, you sort of have to give up control to some degree to that creator. And it's really sort of changing kind of who is a creative, how much control a brand has. It's like forcing everyone to just chill the fuck out and take things, you know, like market first, like audience first. And people talk about this a lot, but I think it's a good thing ultimately, because now you're seeing creators that would, you know, 10 years ago never have had a shot because they didn't have a book that they could go bring it. They didn't know how the system works, but instead they just go create this audience, and it's creative inherently the way they do it. You don't need a book now. Like, you can just be your own. So I think all this is really good. And that's what makes it so exciting to be in my position, because, you know, we get to work with, you know, the best creative agencies in the sort of like 30-second spot world, and then the best in the, you know, product and platform side. And then this sort of this new category, which is not really that new anymore, but the creator side, there's just so much momentum behind it. It's insane. And it's changing, you know, how we think about these things. So
yeah, let me segue that in, because that was a great answer to the Madman question. Because I do want to ask a question for context, but before I do, can you tell us what Raven PR is and what you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. So we are sort of a traditional PR firm in the sense that like our main driver every day is to get coverage for our clients in, you know, everything from the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, New York Times, The Verge, et cetera, down to sort of the publications that are covering this stuff that live and breathe advertising, you know, Ad Age, Adweek, Campaign, The Drum, Marketing Dive, Media Post, you know, Morning Brew, like our Marketing Brew. There's so many of them. And so our purpose in life is essentially to serve a new business function, right? Ad agencies are in a lot of ways exactly like celebrity talent, right? Like they need to be seen doing relevant work in order to get the attention of other folks that would want to work with them, right? So sort of just, you know, word of mouth, but scaled across the internet. And it's in a very nuanced niche market. A lot of people say like, well, why would an advertising agency, like, why would they need a PR firm? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Don't they just create ads for themselves? And certainly agencies do. Like Zulu Alpha Kilo does a great job making these hilarious spots that sort of poke fun at the industry. And there was another great campaign. I forget the name of the agency, but they hired Dr. Ruth. Woo, I think the agency was called. And they hired Dr. Ruth to do a whole thing about wooing clients and wooing customers. And, you know, she's the master of woo, right? So forgive me, that agency, if I got that wrong, but they do it. But what seems to be one of the best ways for brands to filter out who to call when they need help is for somebody else to tell them, you know, this agency does a great job, this production company does a great job, or whatever. And at the end of the year, when Ad Age does their production A-list or their creativity picks of the year, you know, Ad Age A-list, Adweek has breakthrough. I mean, there's a bunch of these different things. Like, you know, if you can get on that list, it's certainly not going to hurt your chances. So in order to navigate all that, you need a full-time team, because it's not just press. It's also, you know, things like this, podcasts, speaking engagements at conferences, awards. I mean, there's thousands of awards and podcasts and conferences. How do you know which ones are any good, et cetera? And so our main function is to sort of filter through all that, plan for all of it, make sure you can get it done, and then get people in those spaces. So that's kind of what we do on the traditional side. And I can talk more about that. I was a reporter, so I know that space very well. My business partner led comms at Mullen Lowe and Y&R. So she came from the big corporate comms world. She knows that whole space. I came from the editorial side, and we sort of jammed the two together. What we do that's really different, and, you know, it's I won't spend a lot of time here, but it is very different. So we amplify the news that we generate for our clients directly to the people that matter to their business. And there's a really simple reason for that. There's so much media coming out every day, right? Like thousands of stories, hundreds alone just in our space, millions across the world. So it's really sort of illogical to assume that any particular person will see any given story, right? Let alone the people you actually want to see that story. So if you're doing PR, you're investing some sizable amount of money, whether it's a couple $1,000s a month or somebody that you pay internally, $200,000. It can be very expensive. So you really want to know that brands and talent and consultants and all these people are seeing this stuff. So what's different about us is we just make sure people see that content, and we do it in a way that's very subtle and sort of reflective of the ad industry's desire to not beat anyone over the head. You just want people to know about you sort of conversationally, right? So that's that. We serve as a new business function and make sure our clients are well represented in the space in which they play.
Awesome. Well, so I want to build on that and selfishly talk about it from the perspective of production companies and directors and creative directors and stuff, because you already started touching on it. We came to this point a few years ago because I was frustrated because I didn't understand why we kept getting good feedback, but I was having issues with new business. And then we finally worked with a large enough agency in New York City. And one of the producers there, she was like, well, how's your PR team? And we were like, yeah, what? What do you mean? You mean the things I post on Instagram? And she was like, no. Then so I actually learned that, like you already said, the ad agencies and production companies themselves also need PR. And I don't know if this is one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you about this context and stuff, because you guys do help creative directors as well, right?
Yeah, we work with
agencies as well.
Agencies, media companies, media networks, ad tech companies, production companies, really anybody that has a stake in the space, that has a compelling story. And it takes all shapes and sizes, right? So for a production company, I'll let you ask your question, but for a production company, there's a whole ecosystem of things that exist that, you can tap into.
I'd love to hear, everything you have to say about that. But from what I gauged and from what we were able to see, it's like until you're working, until some of these agencies are calling you and hiring you for these jobs, you don't know how this stuff works. So I guess if to turn this into a question, what I'd love to hear from you is, aside from the obvious, like getting new business and just making a living, like why is it important to get this right? And how should we be thinking about PR?
It's a really great question. I mean, the reality I think today is that as it has been forever in the advertising trade space, call it, that great work gets coverage, right? The most creative ideas, whether it's a creative piece of art, like commercial art, or it's a piece of innovation work that you've done, something you've created that serves a purpose, like that Live and Let Live campaign that I mentioned, where we're creating a product, that is all creativity inherently. And so there's company, like in a space where, look, what we do is commoditized, right? Like there's 20,000 ad agencies in the United States, something like that. Right. And then there's, I don't know how many production companies, but there's many of them. And so until you break through, you are essentially a commodity competing for, pieces of work here and there. But when you break free of that and you are a preeminent player in the space, like a Tool of North America, who's one of our clients, until you break through, you're sort of hustling, right? Like you're looking for, you might have some really great clients, you might do some awesome stuff, but those big like Nike projects that everybody wants, in order to get those, the director of production, the chief production officer at Wieden & Kennedy or Tombras or whatever, they're evaluating every piece of work that they possibly can to see who's got the best, not just production skills, but like from a directorial standpoint or a creative direction standpoint, has that voice and that storytelling capability that's going to really push the work to that next level. Like they need somebody that can translate the creative vision and make it better. And so there's probably 20 or 30 production companies that really sort of own the market. And then everyone else is sort of like got a great business or is building a great business, but they're kind of scratching at that next. They're like, why aren't we getting these things? And I'm not saying that for sure the press is what makes the difference. It's just that if you don't do it, you're not arming yourself with every potential asset to get there.
If this is applicable to you guys, what's the one thing that you like to make sure of when a company comes to you asking for help? Like, is there a specific or something specific that Raven or you or Holly, that's her name, right? Holly, your co-founder, that you both bring to PR that you want to inject first? Like, is there like a very you and Holly Raven specific thing where you go, okay, this company's coming to us, but here's what we prioritize. So I'm just interested to know what it is that you focus on when a company comes to you.
It's a great question. And I don't know that I've really thought about this before, so I'll try to get there quickly. But the main thing for, I think, me personally, and my business partner is Holly Rapello, and she would probably have a similar, but her own take on this. So I'll speak for myself. But, at the end of the day, everything we do is about providing value to everybody we work with, right? You'd say the same thing about your business. So what that means for me on a day-to-day basis and our team is, we've got this asset, this story for whatever client it might be. And it's a story they want to tell. And it might be right it might be a story that we think is interesting. We might love the story, but the question invariably is, what value does this bring to the wider community? And I think that's one of the real pieces that we bring is trying to be transparent and honest with folks about what we see. And we're not always right. But you do this long enough and you start to kind of feel like what is going to be beneficial, what is going to work, what is going to move.
Are you saying specifically on a case by case basis? Like there's not necessarily a one size fits all one thing that you want to do for everyone. Like you could look at a small production company such as ours and you go, okay, this is what we think is the big thing that's missing that would make the most impact for you all.
Yeah. It's about like, what does your company offer that either nobody else does or that you do, that a lot of people do, but you do it better, right? Like it's the classic, like good, cheap, fast kind of narrative. It's kind of stems from that, but it's applied to like, what are we doing that's going to help move the industry forward with this story? How is this going to like be something that somebody can look at and say, oh, I've never seen that before. And getting to that part is really hard and it's time consuming. So it can create some friction, right? Like if you come in and if you came to me and said, hey, we've got this amazing piece of work, it's never been done before. And we take a look at it. And I think about 3 other campaigns I've seen over the last 5 years or 15 years that sort of reflect that. And if I can't say, oh, this is a new take, or this is completely new, then it's probably not going to work. Now for you, it might be the biggest, best thing you've ever done. And I don't want to take away from that, because so many times we get clients that come to us and they're just so excited about the achievement, like the challenge. I mean, a production is the hardest fucking job in advertising, right? Like so everything can go wrong. Just forget COVID for a second. Even before that, like the schedules, the rigor, keeping agencies and clients happy on set, avoiding like last minute changes and all of that goes into it. It's always last minute, right? Like when is the production ever way ahead of schedule? It just never is, because that's the way things work. So your accomplishment in getting that done might feel just tremendous, but it's not necessarily a reflection of a huge advancement or even a small advancement in the art form. And so we have to sort of like be that bridge. And that's what I love about the job, is like helping take something and sort of mold it in a small way to get it there. But it is different for every company, right? Like a small business is going to have a far different challenge than an established one, but an established business may have seen its star rise, and now it's sort of on the tail end of that arc. And it's wondering, boy, how do we keep this momentum going? Or how do we get it back? And that's what makes it such a fun job. It's like I'm just like a 2.7 GPA journalism major, now helping some of the most creative companies in the world tell their story. Like that's really meaningful to me that I have that opportunity. And then when you get it right and it works, it's like, there's no better feeling for me than seeing, Charlie McKittrick, the chief strategy officer at Mother, say, wow, that was a fucking great story. Like that to me is just like the best feedback you can get, right? Because he's such a legend. The guy is just like incredibly talented and has done it all. You know?
Yeah, you guys have some big clients. I saw you repost something recently with GSD&M on one of their Air Force ads. They seem like one of the cooler, definitely one of the larger agencies in Austin, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, they're sort of the biggest game in Texas, but I mean, that's not really putting a fair boundary around it. They've been around for quite a while and have always done just really fantastic work. Some of our favorite clients, I mean, they're part of a large holding company system, right? And so oftentimes holding company agencies are sort of like towing the line, let's say, or like they're part of the larger system. And GSD&M certainly is, but they also have this sort of independent nature, and they've been able to maintain it despite, you know, leadership changes and ownership changes like that. That's a very rare talent to have.
Can you explain what that means, holding company agencies, for the noobs, myself included?
Sure. So in the 80s, Martin Sorrell launched probably the best known holding company, WPP, I think Wire and Paper Products, and started acquiring, you know, ad agencies. And the purpose, if I can get this right, was essentially to what they wanted to do was have power against the media companies, right? So like the broadcasters, the cable networks, et cetera. Like if you could come to them and say, hey, I manage $20 billion in media spend, right? So I buy ads in total of $20 billion. Now it might be across 100 agencies, it probably is, but hey, I manage $20 billion. You can get a far better rate for your clients, right? You can get a lot more bang for your buck if you come to the table with a lot of money. That's the basic math. So WPP started doing that and started buying up some great agencies. And for a while, the power of those was just unparalleled. Like it really changed the entire industry. And they would just acquire every year. Part of their growth trajectory was to just keep acquiring agencies, because every time you add a shop, let's say they have $20 million in revenue, that's $20 million in revenue you just bought for your company, multiplied by however well you grow that over the next, 5, 10, 20 years. And so the holding companies really sort of came in and completely changed the nature of the beast. Formerly you just had a bunch of independent agencies who were doing their thing and duking it out. But what it did that was really, I think, beneficial was it showed the broadcasters and the cablers, like, you don't have total control about, over this ecosystem. We're going to push back a little bit. And that's changed quite a bit. Like Sorrell has obviously left and started Media.Monks. And that's a whole other iteration of but it's the same idea, right? It's like, let's get some power and scale. Let's bring that scale, not just to the media companies. Let's go. And this has been true for a long time, not just with Media.Monks, but let's bring the scale of our organization to brands, right? Like a P&G, a GM, global organizations that need to have, a single vision applied across the globe, right? Or singular vision with like cut downs for different markets, right? So that power is very beneficial, particularly for big brands that need access. And so all of them need access to production, and they all need access to these things. So having that sort of all under one roof makes a lot of sense for certain brands. Getting it done is very challenging. I don't have the first clue about how to manage something like that, so I won't speak to whether or not it's viable. But it's certainly sort of the 800-pound gorilla, the elephant in the room or whatever.
Well, that was more answer than I knew I was going to get. So thank you. I'm glad we're learning stuff. At least I am. Speaking of locations, obviously there's a lot in common with Austin and Nashville. Aside from the obvious, Nashville's very cool for a lot of reasons, but like why'd you guys pick Nashville, and what keeps you there?
Sort of by accident. My business partner, Holly, is from Tennessee, and after many years working in New York, decided to move back to Tennessee to be closer to family, like so many of us do. And so she ended up here, and my wife, Sarah, was running the operations side of William Morris Endeavor, now Endeavor. Wow. She was running the New York office from an ops perspective, and they asked her to move to Nashville to come and kind of do the same thing for the Nashville office, which was really blowing up because of the music side of the business. I at the time was working at VaynerMedia. Gary Vee he hired me to run a partnership between BuzzFeed and VaynerMedia. It was like the era of the listicle, like if you can remember those days when listicles were super hot. And so BuzzFeed decided that they wanted to monetize those listicles.
Wait, what's the listicle?
10 reasons, you're from Minnesota.
Yes. Okay.
And that kind of stuff. And so Gary hired me from a comms director role at an MDC agency and said, hey, I would love for you to, bring VaynerMedia and BuzzFeed together, help develop this sort of branded listicle thing. And it still exists to this day. It's sort of a different model, but he brought me there. And after about a year of that, I was pretty burned out. I had a really great experience working with Gary. I know a lot of people have opinions about him, but I found him to be one of the best bosses I ever had. Like the guy, we would sit down once a month for a meeting. Like he did this with everyone in sort of like a quasi leadership role, which I kind of was. And so because I was running this partnership, he would bring me in and I would like have pages of notes because I could never remember what we talked about the last time. And I would sit down with him and within 2 seconds, he would remember everything we had talked about the last conversation. And then he would say, how has it moved forward? Like the power of that individual is just his ability to retain and move things forward that he hasn't thought about in, 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 2 years. So
that's cool to know.
But that said, it was a ton of work. And so was happy to move to Nashville, which is sort of like Brooklyn with a backyard. It's really a great environment. Like you said, it's a lot like Austin, 5 years later.
It's like Austin earlier. With water.
Yeah, exactly. And then my business partner and I, we met. She was leading new business and comms at an agency here in Tennessee, in Nashville rather. And asked me to come and support her in that role because essentially she was doing the entire PR function, all that stuff I talked about, press, conferences, podcast, like the whole thing, awards, plus managing the RFP process. And this is one of the biggest agencies in Tennessee, and they were getting RFPs, quite often. So we worked together, and we found that whenever a big RFP came in, like everything else fell off. Like we couldn't keep all those plates spinning, whether it was like outbound marketing or, going to events and things, or like the press side, like staying close with reporters. Like it just became very difficult. And through that process, we, ended up having conversations outside of work about like, well, what if there was a way to sort of automate some of this? What if there was a way to make this easier? And if we could figure it out, we might have a service to offer, other people. And so one day we just sort of put our thoughts down in a deck and decided we actually left the agency and flew to New York after we had left and set up meetings with everybody that we could possibly think of from our past, right? Like I had 25 meetings in 3 days. One of them was with Michael Lebowitz, who is the founder of a really great agency called Big Spaceship. And Michael was sort of a hero of mine. They sort of invented what digital was in the early days. And for a long time, we're sort of just like the it shop. And so when he agreed to sit down with me and talk through what we had put together, I was just like elated. And I walked out of that meeting with him just looking for feedback on the model that we had developed. And he said, hey, I would love to work with you. Like, let's do this. And so like from day one, pretty much we knew that we had something, and we came back to Nashville, and it's been an asset for us. Like people come down because they want to do quarterly planning or annual planning or whatever, and they always want to come here. So it's been a great asset.
That's awesome. Yeah. Nashville like most of the cool medium cities. I mean, I'm a hypocrite because I just moved to one too. I mean, all the medium-sized cities are, they're exploding right now. And I mean, Nashville, from what I hear from my friends who are there, they're like, and my friends in Austin, everyone says the same thing. Everyone's like, man, it's getting crazy. Like the influx is a lot, but that's cool. I'm excited for there to be many other medium-sized cities that people want to go to and work in.
Yeah. I think ultimately, like one of the reasons that we left New York, and I'm sure you felt this too, was like the amount of money we would have to make in order to like own a 2-bedroom was just absurd.
Yeah.
And the amount of work we would have to do would prevent us, we felt, from having the life that we wanted to live, which is not anything crazy. It's just like a normal life, as I see it. And it just didn't seem feasible,
Yeah.
And I feel lucky that we got down here when we did, because, that was 2013. So it's been a long time, but things have changed so much. And there was a time when we thought we better move back to New York or open an office there. And instead, we've just hired people who live there and let them live their lives. And if they want to stay, great. But it's so awesome to be in this world now, because you just you can be a great whatever in any market and kill it. And
it's exciting.
Cares.
It's really exciting. At what point does a production company on the rise? Like we've got those 6-figure clients. They're kind of regular, but we're in this very awkward haircut, medium long situation where we're trying to break through. At what point does I'll just use production company, since it's what we both think we can understand in common between with what we do and what you've done. At what point does a production company or a company similar need to start thinking, okay, it's time to approach a real PR company to help our business grow, because we're doing the same thing a few years in a row now, and we could have been growing a while ago if we had implemented that? At what point, when and how should we start thinking about how to come to your world for help?
It's a really great question. And it's something we get asked a lot. And I've kind of changed how I think about this now, because like I used to say like, well, it's never too early to start doing PR, but I think a better answer is it's never too early to start thinking about it. And there's some really excellent people in the industry who can help sort of with the crawling phase of this, if it's a crawl, walk, run. So you get us at like the walk, run stage, right? Like a full service PR firm, like, and I'll establish what that means in a second. But there are consultants out there, and one of my favorite and one of the best in the world is Elizabeth Rosenberg. She runs something called the Good Advice Company, and Elizabeth was the head of PR globally for 72 and Sunny for many years. So she's done it. And 72 had HO Studios, and so she knows production, and I think they spun that off later, but she was, I believe, there when it started. And so, somebody like Elizabeth, who has left the day-to-day world of doing what I do, which is she still does it from time to time, but like, that's not her core competency today. Today, she really is an advisor to both companies and like individuals within those companies for personal branding, for company branding. She will help establish sort of like, well, tell me what your story is. Let me help you get it in better shape. Let's create some parameters around what we think success looks like from a narrative perspective. And that could be like, we are the best agency in Nashville, or the best production company in Tennessee. That could be like, we have the most tech for it, like whatever it is, like we've got the best roster of talent, like whatever it is, she will help you get to that narrative, and she'll like just really sort of simplify that process. And there's others like her. And I'm sorry, Elizabeth, if I'm getting this wrong at all and you're hearing this. But then there comes a point when you say, okay, like, we've established what our narrative, we know how we talk about ourselves. And this is narrative you can use in new business and whatever, right? Then what's so important and critical for that, like, let's go to market with PR phase is let's create work that feeds that narrative, right? That proves that point. So if you're going to be the best country music production company, like you better be working with, the best artists in country music, right? That's a really bad example, but it serves the purpose of showing.
No, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. If you're identifying your why, your what makes you stand out, and then making content or commercials, we'll say in our case, commercials that feed into the narrative to build onto the brand that much more. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah. And then exactly. And then a quick jump from there is like, looking at the slate of work you have coming up. And this is so hard in production because so often it's like, we only know what the next 4 months look like because that's the nature of the beast. But if
the next 4 months of
life, like we only know what the next 4 months of work are going to look like. Like ideally, let me back up. Ideally, okay, you would look at the whole year and say, we've got 20 productions coming out, 14 of them are going to be just like paying the bills, right? Just not that interesting, but great work. Fine. Got done on time. Everyone's happy. And 6 of them are like fucking killer. They're like really cool. So like, boy, we better have a PR firm to help us, get the word out about this. It's hard to do that for a production company because things are so like quarterly driven, right? Or can be last minute. But so it can be hard to plan for this, but if you know somebody and you said like, listen, like we've done the thing with Elizabeth or whoever, we know our story. We are going to talk to you today in anticipation of in 6 months, would you be able to maybe help us launch a project? Right. And some PR firms, and there's individuals and there's companies like us, right? They'll say, sure, we'll help you with a project. Others will say, no, we only do retainers. At Raven, we're more in the like retainer, always on stratosphere, right? But if somebody comes to us and says like, hey, we've got a project and then we think things are going to ramp up after that, like we'll have that conversation, because if there's a great piece of work, we want to work on it. Like we love it. That's the thrill of the job for us, is having access to great stories. So that's kind of the beat, is like, let's look ahead and see when we've got a great piece of work coming out, plan for that moment as best we can, call up the PR team a month before and say, hey, this thing is coming. And then ideally use that as a kickoff moment to build more momentum, because it's not just that single story that you have. You've now got podcast interviews, awards, conferences that you can talk about that work. So like one great piece of work you can really get a lot of value out of it. And then of course, if you're making sure people see it on the amplification side, it can like really, really accelerate the growth of the company. So that one piece of business might be enough to help you start to kind of break through, and then ideally there's more that comes from it. So it's a hustle. I mean, it's a whole other thing. I always tell people like get some, senior principal and carve out 20% of their time for the first few months that you're doing PR so that they can really focus on getting the firm what they need. Because if you don't have a decision maker in a position like who has time to actually deal with this shit, like it ain't going to happen. So that's kind of a good framing. Yeah.
I was going to say, I like something you said, because I kind of have to take on the strategist role at our company. And you said, if you know there's a cool project, 6 months down the road. So for example, I had a meeting this morning, it's possibly one of our biggest and best clients. So in theory, by you saying that, I should go, you know what, I need to start thinking PR right now. But by thinking PR right now, I'm assuming, just the way it makes me feel, it makes me think like, well, we need to do a good job, because if we're going to go to the trouble, like what is going to make a PR company interested? Which brings me to what might be the last question based on time. I've selfishly been asking about, how you can help companies, you can help, media people, filmmakers, directors, creative directors. But I'm assuming the answer is things that you are excited about. But I'd love to hear, what is it that you are looking for with the companies that come to you? Because you kind of started answering that, I think, a little bit with the way you answered the last question, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it sound like we're sort of evaluating companies and saying, well, they don't have great work, so we don't take them on. It's just like, that's what's going to break through. Like, we just know that those things are what are going to get a reporter's attention, particularly for a production company, which your product is churning out spots and shorts and, 6-second interstitials and all that. And so like, inherently what we look for is just, that's where we start. There's always like a personality thing that goes along with it. There's an ambition and a hunger, and you can kind of feel out who's doing things, who wants to do PR because they really are excited about it. They think they've got momentum, and who's doing it to kind of check a box, but isn't really willing to put in the time. And the last thing that any of us ever wants to do is waste somebody's money or time, you know what I mean? Because they feel like they're obligated to do it. So it's really that simple. It's like some great work, some momentum, some ambition. That's it, and we love having conversations with people to help them kind of just think about this the right way. We do it all the time. Any PR firm that's worth their salt ought to be willing to do that. So I would say just like take the stab, take the leap, give it a shot, have a conversation. Don't overthink it. Just go in with heart and soul and talk to a PR person and say, like, this is where we're at. What do you think? And if they're not willing to give you a good answer, then call somebody else, because, it's a small world, but we all kind of think the same way. It's like, we all just, we all kind of love doing this because of, the creativity. Like, what other industry do you get to just like every day see the best of art and commerce coming together to like help businesses grow? Like, that's what I do as I help businesses grow of all sizes. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. And I would assume, kind of to the nature of what you were just saying, even if a company is not ready for Raven, or even if they can't afford you guys, there's still got to be younger, newer, someone 10 years behind you guys who is trying to get to where you are, who would want to take that production company on, or that commercial director, or that creative director. I would assume. How to find them, I don't know, but there's got to be other people trying to be, do what you all do, so that they can get hired by you, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we refer people to our competitors all the time because, we know them, and this is a space where, it's competitive, but it's also very collegial. I mean, even amongst the agencies, like I know so many of the agencies, they hang out with each other and they talk to each other, and they compete for work, but it's really all in the spirit of like, all right, may the best team win here. May the best idea win here. And that's what I love about this business. It's like you're forced to sort of be in a collaborative mindset. And that's another thing we look for, is like people who really want to think differently and try things in a different way, and aren't, trying to conform to some preconceived notion of what PR is. Because the more flexibility you have with, your approach to this, the better the odds are. And that's where the great ideas come from. So it's cool. It can be, I have some clients who are like, they love doing the PR side of it. It's like the easiest, most fun part of their job. Because they're not the client, they're not the service provider. They are the client, and they get to like play client for a while. So, but I should say, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this too. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but there's a really subtle art as a production company to getting press approval that I really want to make sure your listeners and you're aware of, which is that, you sort of sit like third on the ladder, right? There's the brand first, and then the agency, if there's an agency involved. Of course, if it's brand direct, it's a different situation. And then there's the production company. And a lot of the best agencies out there, if you're working with a well-known shop, they're going to have a PR function. And if you come to them and say, hey, we'd like to do PR, you need to be ready for them to say, we're going to control it, or the client's going to control it. Give us exactly how to spell your company name, and we'll make sure you get included, or give us a list of the credits and who did the SFX and the VFX and the color correction, and we'll make sure that gets listed. Well, that creates a challenge, right? That feels like a wall. But there's some really great publications that I highly suggest you and your listeners check out. Shoot, Shots, Real 360, Muse by Clio, which is the Clio Awards publication. These are 4 of my favorite publications that really do put a focus on the production side of the industry. And they are some of the best writers in the entire space, right? Like, they do really great work. They tend to be artists themselves. They really care about the craft, and they want to hear directly from companies like these. So you don't have to have a PR firm to get their attention. You really don't. You just have to have the time and, take a little time to write a nice email and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. And you can start that way. And but getting the permission first from that client is really important, because the last thing you want to do is burn a bridge with a great client that after going rogue on some PR. So feeling that out, when to feel it out, is important. You don't want to do it day one, like on your call this morning. You want to wait until sometime when you feel more comfortable about how things are. Maybe it's like post-production, we're getting down to 3 weeks before the thing goes live. That's a good time to ask. And see what's going on.
That's really good, man. That's really good value. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
A lot of value in a short sprint there. Well, I know I only asked for you for an hour, so I don't want to hold you too long. If I have time for another question, I'll ask one, but if we got to wrap it up, just let me know.
No, go ahead. I'm available.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll ask one more. You've already kind of wonderfully answered so many questions and weaved all the answers to questions I didn't even have to ask. And so thank you for that. I guess I'm curious to know, something I like to ask is, from my perspective, you guys are very cool. You're doing great. You're cruising at a good altitude, so I like hearing your opinions on stuff. So I'm curious to know what you personally are curious about in the industry right now. Like what in, if anything, what in advertising is of interest to you lately? You've already touched on some stuff that was kind of cool. I don't know, maybe it could be a technology thing, the way things are changing, maybe operating from smaller cities or something like that. But if there is anything, I'm interested to know what's got your attention lately.
That's an interesting question. I think right now, we talked about this, like the spreading out across the country, talent leaving. I remember famously there was I'll leave her name out of it. There was a head of a really big media company that moved to like Northern Michigan during the pandemic and had I think she might be back now. I'm not really sure. I don't know her personally, but like that sort of brain drain from LA and New York and San Francisco, and the sort of refocus towards the personal life that we all sort of strive for, I think is good. And secondarily, I think it's important. I don't know if you remember when President Trump was elected, there was a big period of like sort of agencies saying, oh my gosh, like we didn't see this coming. And like a bunch of agencies started like sending teams across the country to learn about the heartland and, to figure out how we missed all this coming and things like that. It was a very strange moment, no matter what side of the political lines you fall on. It was just like a kind of a big awakening. And then the pandemic sort of after the agencies like went and did all this research and made their white papers, then suddenly the pandemic forced people out of those cities. So now we've had not only the learning, but we're now becoming the industry itself is becoming more a part of like the American population, the culture. I think that's inherently so important for the future of the business. It's something I'm really interested in watching. And like one of the reasons we love being in Nashville is we have tons of clients in New York and LA, but we also tend to be the shop that people call who are not from those markets because they sense that we're a little bit different. Like forget that Holly and I both came up in New York and that we have a couple of people up there and that we inherently sort of learned the trade up there. Just the fact that we moved out here is really becoming sort of a differentiator for us as well. I think because people sense that we weren't afraid to take that leap and to be somewhere that wasn't this core market. And I hope it's a signal to others to do the same thing. Like go be where you want to be and build the life you want to build. And like the industry is now set up to allow that. So that's probably the biggest thing. And I'm curious to see how that changes, sort of the makeup of the work, like what the work looks like and what the stories look like and how well people are reached. And can it help to, this is a really kind of silly, naive idea, but can it help to sort of like correct some of the misinterpretation that's gone on about what this world is that we live in? Can it help with that? I really hope so. You hear people, I was listening to an interview the other day about, I was a comedian who moved to like Texas or somewhere. And he's like, I live next to somebody who's like got like some sort of Republican candidate placard on their front lawn or whatever. And I had a really good conversation with that person about their political views and sort of what they care about. And this person was from California. And he said, like, I could have never even had this conversation in the community I used to live in. And that's not a knock on California or the values of those communities. It's just that like exposure to more ideas and living next to people who think differently than you, I think is inherently a good thing. It's not my idea, but it's a good thing. And I'm really curious to see if that helps us sort of get along, and
I like that. No, that's a great answer. I could go on for hours about cities because I've kind of obsessed. I moved way too long, spent like 10 years moving. I left LA 10 years ago almost now, and just has been checking out all of the medium cities like New Orleans, Atlanta, DC, Austin, and now we came to, and it's funny because I thought I was interesting. I'm such a poser really, because I'm just doing the same thing that thousands of other people are doing. Like we just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. Oh, cool. And I do all this research and I'm like, I think it's going to happen here. Well, then you can do a year and a half's worth of research, but then in like 3 or 4 months, everyone catches up with you. I mean, this market is exploding. Nashville's exploding, but it is interesting because people are talking about cities that you would never hear about before. And I do think it's very exciting for local economies. And then what you were talking about, integration, that's really cool. I didn't actually think about it from such an I was only selfishly thinking about, what's going to work for me so that I can have a good quality of life, like good healthcare, but a good economy, but also a family, but also a backyard. Yeah. And I've never heard it framed in such an optimistic way as what you just did. So that's really nice. I appreciate that. Oh man. Well, I want to add one more thing to it if I can, just as that. Yeah, please do.
Do you remember when the Great Recession happened and suddenly Lehman Brothers fell apart and I don't know if you were paying attention back in those days. This was like when I was a reporter, it was like everybody was losing their jobs, right? Like thousands a day, literally thousands and thousands in the industry. And what I saw come out of that was not just a bunch of like startup agencies and things like that, but there was a lot of people that just like said, screw it. And they just started making cupcakes and like bakeries, like cupcake bakeries, like blew up. But that really like the biggest impact that recession had is it led to the creation of the DTC economy, right? And direct to consumer for a while was like the hottest thing, but it was like these small mom and pop businesses that figured out how, and that paired up with like these sort of like cheap fulfillment companies, right? So you can like store units and get them shipped and all that. It's like the internet really helped to democratize like, any kind of DTC business and allowed them to survive and thrive. And now we're kind of seeing the same sort of pattern again caused by the pandemic, where people are going, hey, I don't have to conform to like one way of of living. I don't have to be in New York or LA or San Francisco if I'm in advertising. I can do this from anywhere. So I think we're really on the cusp of like the next great wave of what this looks like. And it ties into the creator economy. It ties into anywhere you can see like the democratization of whatever happening. It's all kind of feeding back into this. And the centers of control and power are really shifting. And the companies that are doing it right, and these predominantly are the companies that we find in our circle. I'm not saying that they're all perfect or doing things perfectly. What I'm saying is that the leadership in these organizations, whether it's Tombras or Anomaly or Mother or Jam3, I mean, the list goes on, they really sort of grasp and understand that. And they have flatter organizations. They have more autonomy for their people. They have flexibility in PTO and things like this, which are box checking maneuvers, but they're just creating systems that are freeing of their people with a refocus on like the personal life. And I think that is the best possible transition for our economy, is one that allows people to be themselves and to still work, versus the old school, which was like conform. And only the people that can fit in this conformist sort of structure are going to be the ones that survive. Everyone else gets fucked, right? You stay in the same job for 15 years, you just get skipped over for promotions. And that to me is what, like, I got fired from so many jobs, Cody, like so many jobs, dude, like
really,
or got fired or like asked to leave, or like, hey, you've got 60 days, like we'll let you walk on. Yeah. Because I was always just like talking and sharing ideas. And then I would get pissed about, I was immature, like largely. Right. But once I formed Raven with Holly, and it was really at her urging, she's like, we can do this. And I was like, I don't think, what the hell are you talking about? She's like, no, we can do this. But once she said that and kind of gave me the permission, well, today, like the business is doing really well because of that freedom. So it's like that, you know, this cliched idea of like entrepreneurial spirit, right? It's such a cliche, but cliches are cliche for a reason, because they're true. And so the best companies, the most successful ones, the ones that we love working with, have that spirit sort of infused in their business, and they allow people to fly. And, you know, if they don't make their quarterly numbers, like it's cool, like, don't worry, you know, we'll get them next time. And that's a really positive sign, I think, that we're heading in the right direction. So for all the cynicism and all the like pessimism about the industry, I think it's the best time ever to be doing this job.
Awesome. I don't think we can get much better than that. I'm gonna leg slap to that one. That'll
put it to
Matt, bed. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you sharing all this stuff. We got a few good nuggets of wisdom in here, man. So I really appreciate that. Where, if anywhere, would you like people to find or follow you?
Yeah, you can check us out at ravenpublicrelations.com, Raven like the bird. We are so us. And then you can email me if you're curious, Matt, M-A-T-T at ravenpublicrelations.com. And let me not end before saying, like, thank you for doing this. Like, it's really awesome. Like, the way that you interview is awesome. And I think what you've done for Cry is just like, you're getting yourself into spaces that would just not have been accessible in any other way. Like, you might have gotten here in some other way, like we might have met some other way, but you've really made something. It's so hard to do. So keep it going. Don't stop. It's killer.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap us out, and thank you so much for doing this, man.
No problem, dude.
We hope you enjoyed this episode with Matt Van Hoven. You can find links to Matt and Raven PR in the show notes. If you have any guest recommendations or notes or feedback, please let us know via Instagram, Facebook, or a review on Apple Podcasts. From Cry, a creative, production, and post house based in New York City, I'm Cody, and this is Filmmakers in Advertising.